obviously we know you run this store, DJ's Universal Comics in Studio City, and you have dealt with crossovers for at least since the mid '90s. You've been doing this almost 30 years.
Since I was collecting back in '86, '84.
So what do you remember being the biggest crossover series before the '90s? Like
crossovers.
Well, the first, not the best, but the first one.
The crossovers were used differently back in the '80s. I mean, you want to talk a crossover book? The two key books was on the Marvel end was Marvel's, Secret Wars, and then DC had Crisis on Infinite Earths. They were approached differently. With Marvel's Secret Wars, you had
they were called crossovers because you had characters from different books joining together in one book.
The Secret Wars, the first Secret Wars book was self-contained to that 12-issue miniseries. So let's say if you had Amazing Spider-Man 251, and then 252 came out, he had the Venom costume.
Right.
So it was like quick flip. There wasn't like to where in Infinite Crisis, because the way the story was told and the way the universe was built. I mean, they ran crossovers in the issue. You had Infinite Crisis crossover 2-3 issues, so it was more involved. What DC was doing as a crossover was more involved than what Marvel did.
So what sounds like is DC's really they're the ones that started.
They're the one, I would say.
The whole multiple.
Like I said,
book.
they're both in the same category. It's just it was approached differently.
Right.
Now, when you did Marvel Secret Wars 2, then Marvel expanded the crossover, the tie-ins and stuff. I mean, but originally it was like a summer event. You know what I mean? You had your Atlantis Attack event one summer where every annual had a Atlantis Attack, tie-in. That was your tie-in, And one of the reasons is back in the day, books sold by the buttload. I mean, they were like just selling, and you didn't need
the gimmick
to get everybody. Oh, I gotta buy this book. But then, as time progressed, they saw that it was selling. People were buying them, so eventually evolved to, where it crossed over like a story in the Avengers and the monthly Avengers. It touched in X-Men or this or that, and that's because they live on the same planet. So it had to affect. You had to show as the stories got more evolved. You had to show how A affected B.
Right.
And over the years.
But it used to be like you'd get a guest appearance for a couple issues, and that was that.
Yeah. But the year, like I said, if the stuff sells, you keep doing it. You're not going to stop it.
Right.
It makes no sense from a business aspect to, look, we just made this much money off this crossover. Let's not do any more crossovers.
So then let's segue into my experience with crossovers.
Right. Here, you want a shoulder?
Yes.
That's okay. Tell Uncle Cat why are you upset with crossovers?
It was the spring of '95. Actually, the big crossover event that actually stopped me, it took me out of comic books for over 10 years, was in the mid '90s, and it was actually what led to almost the death of comic books for a little while there, from the late '90s to the early 2000s, was the Age of Apocalypse crossover.
What are you talking about? That was great. It was brilliant.
I'm not saying it was bad. Here's the issue with it. The problem with it was that you got your teenage readers in there, and you would read one book, and it's like, to continue it, you got to buy New Mutants number 175, and then you buy that book, and then you had to jump into Excalibur to follow the same storyline. It wasn't like now we have it where you have your Secret Invasion or your Civil War, where they're tie-in books,
right?
That you don't have to pick them up.
True.
Age of Apocalypse started this thing where you had to buy every single book. So you
have to buy every X-Men book. So if you were an X-Men reader, you're stuck with it. But most people were comic book buyers, so they bought everything.
Well, the issue I had with it, and this actually killed a lot of people, at least my age, from my generation, was we had this much money a week to buy comics, and all of a sudden,
job, bro.
Okay, yeah. Says they got out of the store, but it turned into like me spending $20 a month maybe to now having to find $100 a month to follow one storyline.
But you could have. I mean, yes and no, because.
Well,
again,
here's the problem. You can't tell me. You can't say, well, you could have, would have, should have, because I'm not the only. This, and then the launch of variant covers and so on, and so gimmick covers is what almost killed the business.
No, what killed the business? I mean,
And
what
eBay
almost
as
what,
well.
what hurt the business, and I'm a big supporter of this idea, and I'm pretty sure at some point somebody has to agree with me. The lack of kids in my industry. That's what hurts the business, because up to the late 90s, and we talked about up to the late 90s, I was a kid. There were kids coming into bookstores and buying comics. In the late 90s, introduced video games, introduced automated destructions, and the companies didn't do anything to keep that age group in the industry. So we were stuck with the grown-ups, with you and everybody else that was going through things, and your pocketbook was tight.
But I was one of those kids I was still a kid. I was in high school when all this stuff happened. And video games had been around since the mid 80s.
But not to the extent that Xbox, when Nintendo and all this stuff came out.
Nintendo came out in 1985.
But still, they advertised, and they were taking.
I don't want you to blame PlayStation.
I'm not blaming. I'm just giving you the fact that
store.
I was in business back then in the 90s. I saw the kids go away, and it wasn't because of comics.
No, I'm saying prices was a big part of it. Money was it. Like they changed the paper stock. They went to magazine, so the price of the books went up exponentially. It wasn't like slowly a quarter here and there. It was like from one night to the other, the book was up $1, the book was up $2. You know, then the gimmick cover thing. You know, all the foil covers, the foil variants and stuff.
Look,
it was a myriad of factors. But for me, the big one for me and a lot of people where I was having to all of a sudden start buying these books, because it wasn't just that event. Then everybody else started doing with other events as well. So now you went from buying maybe 5 books a month, maybe 10 books a month, to I gotta get 30 books now. I got No,
I understand. Look, I understand your plight.
Yeah.
That's fine. But the problem is you got to look at it. This is a manufacturing industry.
Mm-hmm.
It's a business. It's not. We're not doing comics to tell. Yeah, okay, we tell stories, but at the end of the day, we got to sell this stuff. So as a company, with the marketing department, they saw, hey, this sells. Fuck, let's do more. So they pushed it till it broke. And even after it broke, they're still pushing it differently. And again, like now with variants, you want to blame anybody, blame DC with the variants, because I think the first variant was during Jeff Loeb's run on Batman, Batman's, the Jim Lee run, Batman Hush. The book sold through the roof. They're like, okay, we need more. Let's do a second print. Rather than do a second print with the same cover like they used to do it. Oh, actually, they never did it. He threw a different cover on there. Oh my God, the book sold.
Yeah, I remember, and they're worthless books, but I remember, Marvel put out New Mutants '87 with the gold.
But there was that, but
as a second print.
Yeah, they did switch. Then they sold. You had the newsstand editions. Well, I mean, there were. Again, and all of that was created because of marketing. They needed to sell more units. It's a tough subject for me to defend when I hear that argument, like your argument. Look, I'm in business. I mean, from a business angle, I see it. I see the need for it, because it's the demand's there. Whether it's another 10,000 units a month, 20,000 units a month, whatever it is, it's an extra sale. Not everybody buys it, and I get it. From your end, if I didn't run the shop and I was you, yeah, I'd probably be upset. I'm like, fuck, I gotta buy more books. But if I like what I do, I would find a way to figure it out. You know what I mean? Because I personally, as a kid, I didn't care much for video game or anything. I loved comic books. I loved to read. So before I opened the business, I was buying everything. I literally was buying every Marvel, every DC, even Independence at the time, Elementals, all that stuff, First Comics. What hurts numbers now is the lack of the publishers advertising the product. The idea of comic books, and that's the thing. How can I sell this if there's nobody knows about? To this day, and I've said this before, there's people that walk in the shop off the street and they look at me, oh, a comic book store. I didn't know you guys still existed. I didn't know you guys, they still make comic books. I'm like, oh my God, is this for real? I mean, as,
okay, but
as an industry,
so then let me ask you,
lacking,
what was the marketing before?
the market, they hit, that's the problem. I don't think they had marketing before. They just saw people spend money. They didn't care that the kid market disappeared, because the kid market is what replenishes it, because the kid will get exposed. So from 6, and talk to anybody that's my age, from 6 to about 17 reading comics. Then life happened, college, they went to college, they took a break, some still collected through college. Mm-hmm. Once they got out of college, they came back and they got a workforce, whatever, they got back into comics. So you need that kid to replace, to come back in.
Right.
But
my question to that is, like, back in the 80s and 70s, was there marketing for comics?
I'm sure there was. No, there wasn't. Even then
So,
there weren't. But the thing is, you didn't have the distractions that you have now. And comics were available at 7-Eleven. You can walk into a Walden Books, and they had a 2-3 comic book racks right there. Hell, you watch G.I. Joe, the first season, I think. You watch it, and at the end of each cartoon, that's how I found out about comics. Hey, if you want to follow the further adventure of G.I. Joes, go to Walden Books. They're on the spindle rack.
Right.
I'm like, what the? I went, oh, there you are. Then I found the comic books.
I mean, I will agree with that. Like the direct to market, which is you, by the way. That the bookstores don't exist anymore, so you don't see any comics at bookstores really.
You see, Barnes & Noble has trade paperbacks, but that's even that.
But even those
help.
are all slowly closing down by themselves
because they're not selling.
And you're not at the people just aren't buying physical books anymore. Like
well,
it's just in general.
There's a lot
physical
of
stuff.
But again, as a society, you can be trained to buy something if you're being if you're being whacked over the head with it long enough. Just like everything else. Everything we consume, we've been go buy this, go buy this, go this, watch this, do this. Look, go read some comics. Why do I say every week, go buy comics? It's a repetition that eventually becomes part of your norm. And that repetition stopped. Somewhere in the 90s, it stopped to where there was no repetition for a kid to come in every Wednesday to pick up their comics, to read something. And then when the economy crashed, the grown-up that was involved in comics, it was spending money like it was, here, won $1,000, sure. It's good yesterday. That stopped. My table, you didn't know me back then. How long did we know each other?
I've known since 2008.
2008.
So right after the house.
So I was down there.
Yeah.
So I mean, you would walk in. I mean, I had stacks like crazy, and they would move. You can't do stacks, and you see my stacks now. I mean, you know, every so often you get a House of X, a Powers of 10, a Wolverine #1, where you like order health because you know people are gonna. Again, why? Because it's X-Men. It's brand. The brand brings you back. Same with I mean, if you teach somebody to come in every week to buy comics, you have no problem. So because of the lack, they have to compensate. Because now, and I've said this before, nowadays it's not about individual numbers. Right now, it's about volume at the printer. How many do we need to print a month? If the cutoff is 1 million units, okay, how can we get the 1 million units? Okay, individual titles, obviously, they don't sell. What one issue cracks 100,000 copies now?
You don't make movies off of how many tickets you sell pre-sale, but comics are like everything is off of what you make pre-sale.
Well, no, because it's a different product. See, again, it's a product consumption.
Right, but the problem is that
the average human being
books can start getting canceled before they've had time to breathe because people find out about the books later with the trades or whatever. Like,
but you can't wait 3 issues, bro. If by 3rd issue
they brought up the question, they didn't bring up the solution. They're obviously
everybody's got questions, nobody's got solutions. And again, is there a solution? Yeah. Advertise.
Well, they also don't count trades towards the print
because it's not original content. It's a reprint. I wouldn't count the trades and sales, but on the overall volume you count it. So when you go to the printer every month, so you said I need 1 million units. I don't care how you get me those 1 million units. Mm-hmm. So you do your titles a month. Okay, this unit sells 50, 20, 30, 40, 60, whatever. Okay, trade paperbacks, we got 5, 10, 20,000. Okay, what else do we need? Okay, we need this. Okay, let's do a Mary Jane variant month. So that's another 50,000. Let's do another variant, another open order variant. So you do 3, 4 open order variants. Okay, we hit the margin.
Well, well, let's actually answer. Let's read the actual question because we've gone off into a tangent.
I get all just like, please,
So DNT Dynamite, big supporter of the channel, asks your take on comic book crossovers. How well or not do they fare in the long run, and also in terms of sales?
Well, I mean, look, nowadays the crossovers are different. It's used differently. What's a good example right now?
There's War of the Realms came out last year, right? Or
All right, so it was last year. So you take War of the Realms, and even something like that, it was a crossover.
And Absolute Carnage is a crossover.
Yeah,
right now.
but if you pay attention, like you said, they're concentrated. Yes, they do affect the whole universe, but the only books that are directly affected by the crossover is going to be Amazing Spider-Man and Venom. Now, you had a bunch of one-shots, like you had your Absolute Carnage, Avengers tie-in, or you had your Absolute Carnage Captain Marvel, or you had this, that. Could you have done without those? Oh yeah, definitely. Because the main story was the book itself and the two. And there's a lot of that, so it is a crossover, but it's targeted. How does it affect long-time collectors? Unless something crazy happens in that storyline, a lot of them go away.
Right. If you read them, great, enjoy the story. But as a speculator, if you're like trying to hold on to something, they're only going to go up if something major that affects and continuity for a long time happens in it. And usually a lot of these one-shots have a random first appearance that later on down the line pays off, but it's just...
And you got to pay attention to who does it, too, who's the writer.
Right.
Again, Civil War was a story that involved the whole Marvel universe. It involved heroes and villains because they were trying to pass the Registration Act.
It was a different take on it.
It was not the mutant. This was affected everybody. So of course it was a bigger scope tie-in, and it had lasting effects for a while.
I want to say it kind of made Captain America. What's the word I'm looking for? I think between this run and Ed Brubaker, it made Captain America relevant.
No, he definitely catapulted that character higher because he was
in the '90s he was kind of
just a Captain America.
Yeah, nobody really cared about him.
Yeah,
and then the movies, and he's out where he's at now. But I think that book was hot for a little while. That series was hot for a few years, and now, especially when the movie came out, because the movie was so different than the books. You gotta keep in mind the stuff that's happening now versus the stuff that was happening before is two different. Now you're being owned by Disney. A lot of the stuff is you're talking billion-dollar properties now because of these movies. Right.
So a lot of the things they do in the comic book, it plays into the movies, plays into copyrights and everything else. Fantastic Four, X-Men, for example. I mean, we've talked about this, the lack of push behind these characters. Their stuff was horrible, and again, it's all because of the mass media.
Well, because the money's
different
in the movies now. The money's in the movies and all the stuff that goes along with the movies, the merchandise, if you will, and we're just hoping that some of that runoff comes to the comic book store.
If all I want is just exposure for the product. You put a product out and you advertise this, people will find it. Because if they want to, it's about consumption. That's the thing, and it's like nobody's consuming this product. Not that they're not buying, nobody's consuming. They don't even know this product exists.
Still exists.
It still exists. You know what I mean? So that's the part. It's like, just don't advertise me. Don't, but again, that's another discussion. How I feel. I've talked to a few publishers, and I'm getting calls lately. Everybody's trying to push their product, but you don't push it to me. I got a catalog every month. I already know your product.
Right.
Who else knows about this product?
And that is a different topic we can discuss in the future. But how do you guys feel? Let us know in the comments section if you made it this far. And that's going to do it for us, guys. Thanks for watching. We will see you next week. And if you like this video, make sure to check out what you see up on the screen.